Well, I think we'll start. I think some folks will probably be coming in. Um, Typical of every Metro event, we have people who are here right on time and then others that come on Metro time. So we'll welcome them, but we will get started. A couple of housekeeping things. One of the things we're going to try and do is make sure we have your most up-to-date email address. You notice that we communicate quite frequently by email. So I'm just asked you to put your name, your church role, what church you're from, and the role you have there, and your email address in the chat window. I'll save the chat at the end and then give that to our data folks, and they'll just double check and go in and make sure we have good emails for you. If you're on here now, we apparently have some email that's right for you, or somebody that has a correct email got this to you and you found your way here. Either way, we're glad you could be with us. We want to do a number of these events throughout the year for particularly for church treasurers and church board secretaries. We know there's a lot to do in both of those roles, and we want to be as much of a support to the people who fill those as we can be. And so throughout the year, you'll see us send a note that we're going to do some kind of training and invite you to invite those who want to come in. There's nothing confidential that we're going to share tonight. Most of you know that what I'm going to share, we shared with the district assembly. So, and that was out on Facebook Live. So there's really literally nothing secret to what we're going to do. What I want to do with you is walk you through in a little more detail the changes that were in the Finance Committee report, particularly with regards to churches sending in their allocation funds. And I'll talk a little bit about that, show you the breakdown and how it's going to work. And then after that, I'll take any questions. As long as you have questions that you'd like answered, I'll stay on and chat with you on that. You're free to type a question in the chat window, but I just tell you that I'm admitting people to the Zoom room. I'm looking at PowerPoint, and so I probably will miss questions that are in the chat window until we get a little further down. So if you have a question, just kind of hang on to it. And when we get to the end, I think you'll be able to ask it. So this is the Finance Committee report, essentially, that was presented to the district assembly. We're representing it in sort of a summary mode to those that are on here tonight, and that's my email address. I think most of you know it, but you can get me at pastorbruce@mnynaz.com. So the Finance Committee met this year, and one of the things we were tasked with, as we are every year, is presenting the model for churches to give financially to meet obligations to the general international church and the district. Those of you who've been around the Church of the Nazarene long enough remember wording like budget allocations, things like that. So the Finance Committee meets, and since 2009, we have not changed dramatically the model or the amount of funds that are allocated to the church. The way it was set up in 2009 was that churches would send 12% either weekly after your Sunday tithes and offerings were collected and counted and deposited. You'd send that weekly, or monthly was our second option. We didn't really like quarterly. That put us in a little bit of a bind. And we really didn't care for the annual check to come in. Those two are the least attractive to us, though we understand there are times when churches need to do one of those, but our preference was that either every week or at least monthly, you would take an accounting of the income that you had taken in tithes and offerings, and you would send 12% of that to the district office. From there, we would send, taking your 12%, 4% of that was allocated toward world evangelism, and we sent that to the General Ministry Center in Kansas City. 4% was kept on the district. 2.25% was sent to pensions and benefits, and 1.75% to ENC. The world evangelism and ENC were both below the amount that the general church says that local churches should be sending to the general church. And that decision was made in 2009. I was on the district. I was not on the finance committee. My understanding is that Pastor Art at the time, our district superintendent, felt strongly that asking churches, going from a model where you were sending money to different areas, that this would be too problematic. So he set those two funds, World Evangelism and ENC, below what was being requested, and then encouraged our local churches to take Easter and Thanksgiving offerings and send an additional 1.5% to World Evangelism Fund and 0.5% to ENC. If local churches did both of those things, a church would theoretically have paid their budgets in full. As I reported at District Assembly, last year, only 2 churches on the district sent that additional fund to Eastern Nazarene College, and less than 10 sent them to the World Evangelism Fund. So we talked about the finance committee, and we wanted to come up with a plan that was easier to understand and that helped churches hit that target of paying your budget allocations in full. We get so many questions at the end of the year when pastors fill out their APR report and they see that they didn't pay budgets in full. They didn't understand it. They'd call us and ask us. We could tell pretty quickly that they hadn't paid the ENC or the World Evangelism Fund. So we tried to come up with a model that would make it easier for the church treasurer, and the pastor, and that's what we recommended to the district assembly. What we recommended was each organized church contributes 14% of their income to fund the vision and mission of the Church of the Nazarene. Breaking that 14% down, it's 5.5% for world evangelism, 2.25% for Eastern Nazarene College, 2.25% for pensions and benefits. And I would add that those percentages are set by the general church and the General Assembly. And then the district allocation remained the same at 4%. You exclude from that special offerings and funds that fall out of that thing, like Alabaster special projects, any pass-through funds, et cetera, things like that. I really wanted to make the point that we were not increasing the obligations that the churches had all along. Local churches had all along an obligation at 14%. We were just changing the model to make it easier for you and to hopefully make sure that World Evangelism Fund and Eastern Nazarene College get their full share of what would be coming in. So again, breaking this down, and it's repeating, but I wanted to make sure everybody saw it in whatever format made sense to them. If you send your 14% of your offering raised on Sunday every week, or the total of your monthly tithes and offerings to the district office, we will send those out as the percentages that you see there, and that would make sure that your budgets are paid in full at the end of the year. Putting that into a bright, colorful chart, your budget obligations from 2009 to 2021 were 14%. Again, World Evangelism Fund, you sent us 4%, P&B 2.25%, ENC 1 3/4, Metro 4, and then it was the obligation of the local church through our recommendation was Easter and Thanksgiving offerings, but you could do it anytime. You could send the additional 1.5 to World Evangelism and the additional half to ENC. The new model is exactly the same, 14% obligation, but instead of you being responsible, we're going to take the responsibility to make sure those are paid for you. So you're going to send us 14%, and we will distribute it out in those so that those percentages are met. Again, repeating what I told the district advisory board when we presented this to them was, we're not asking you to pay more in your obligations than you were before. We think this makes it a fairly simple model. In addition, New Start churches have always been asked to send 10% of their tithes and offerings to the district. The district was sending 2.25% to pensions and benefits, but nothing else to World Evangelism or ENC. The rest of the money was kept on the district to help with church planting. We recommended to the district advisory board and to the Manhattan Initiative board that New Start churches would continue to send us 10%, but we would send out your full apportionment to World Evangelism, to pensions and benefits, and to Eastern Nazarene College, and we would keep none on the district. Manhattan Initiative will fund New Start churches on the district through the district superintendent's office. But we want even New Start churches, your pastors and your treasurers, to get in this habit of being a partner to the International Church of the Nazarene and to the Metro Church of the Nazarene, Metro New York District. And then once a church becomes organized, that 10% goes to 14, and the 4% is kept on there. As we put into the finance report some different ways for you to look at this. There's a list on fundingthemission.org with the things that are excluded. But basically, if you give somebody a donation for a charitable contribution, that would go here unless it's designated for alabaster special projects, pass-through funds, and the like. We also encourage all of our churches to participate in the general church offerings for World Evangelism, which usually is Easter and Thanksgiving offerings, Nazarene Bible College, Nazarene Seminary, among others. And just a reminder that 14% plan does include your support for District Sunday School and Discipleship Ministries, which is now NDI, Nazarene Youth International, NYI, and Nazarene Missions International. So we wanted to share that, present it, and then answer whatever questions you might have. The one question I got the other night in a phone call related to this was, when does it start? Our recommendation is that the churches would start this January 1. When we have a way, we can help you do that. If you prefer to start it April 1st, that's fine. You just need to tell us when you're sending 14%. We will consider 12% that came in January through April, or January through March, and we'll send those percentages out the way we were sending them before, and you would be responsible for making the extra 1.5% payment on your own. However, I think the simpler way, and the way we can be of help to you, is if you go back to January and you calculate what your 14% would have been on what you've sent us, assuming you've sent money in January, February, March for 2022. Don't count what you sent for 2021, but anything that you sent for 2022, if you sent anything and you recalculate what it would have been at 14%, you can send us a separate check for that amount and just mark it World Evangelism Fund, ENC. And if we see that, we will know that all of that goes out in those percentages that you would have sent it out. We won't keep any on the district, and we won't send any to P&B because that's already fully funded. So as an example, let's just say, for example, 1 week you sent us $1,200 because you took in $10,000. And that week you would have sent us, in the new model, $1,400. You can send us a check for $200 and mark it that way. In doing that, you will have caught up for the first quarter, and then going forward, you'll be on the new model. And by the time we get to the end of the year, you will theoretically have paid your budgets in full. We think that's the easiest model. It's a little more work on our end, but we're willing to take that on. If you prefer to catch up on your own, that's fine as well. Just know that for that first quarter, you have 1.5% for World Evangelism and 0.5% for ENC that you still need to send directly to those two organizations to be fully funded by the end of the year. So let me stop there. That was really the only question I got the other night that I talked with one of our churches. And so I want to stop there and give you a chance to ask questions that you might have if I created any for you.
I have a question, Bruce.
Sure.
Yeah. It was my understanding back then when the district decided not to pay the 5.5% fully and the other percentage to ENC, that there were other districts also not, actually even doing less than what our district did because of the financial burden they figured that some of the churches weren't able to carry, in addition to paying their World Evangelism funds through Easter offering and Thanksgiving offerings and stuff like that. So I don't know, I'm not sure where we are, if that was a consideration then, or what the focus is that process this change right now.
Yeah, really I wasn't part of that conversation. I do know that when the general church itself shifted to this kind of a model where we're setting a percentage versus the old days where whatever you raised last year was the basis for your allocations for this year. So if you raised $100,000 last year, you got budget allocated for this year, for that next year based on your 100,000. And a lot of churches were saying, look, our church has shrunk from last year. We can't pay budgets in full because we're smaller than we used to be. And so the general church, and actually, I think Dow Mucci was ahead of the curve with this, because Dow really came up with this model ahead of the general church and had to sell the general church on letting us do it. And so I'm sure that there were churches. I was on the main district in 2000 through 2006, and our budget allocation was like 19%. So I'm sure that there were kind of winners and losers in the districts. There were kind of winners and losers in churches, but this model seems to take into account the current status of the local church, as well as the rhythms. So rather than getting an allocation that you divide out by 12 months and you try and pay it every month the same amount of money, now you're basing it on the rhythms of your church. So if half of your church goes away for the summer, or as we know in New York State, you can have 2 or 3 snow days in January and February when your church isn't even meeting. You don't have the same allocation. Now also for us old timers, Cecil, I don't mean old, but I mean those who've been around a while. It was a big deal to have that thing in the manual or the journal that listed the churches that pay their budgets in full, and there were awards if you did. There was all of that kind of thing that Art sort of kind of Art had a different philosophy when he took over as DS, and so he moved some things away. We've stayed with that, so we don't really indicate in any public forum which churches pay budgets in full, but a lot of churches want to meet that request of the general church. And so when they would get to the end of the year thinking, hey, we've been sending our 12% all along, why does this formula, which you can't change, there are things you can't change about the APR report, would say your budgets aren't paid in full. And pastors would call us and we'd say, well, did you send the 1.5 and the half? And for the vast majority of our churches, the answer was either no, or I have no idea what you're talking about. You also might remember that the finance committee report used to be about 10 pages long. We've really tried to put in there just enough so that it's important enough that you'll read it, and not get lost on some of the other things. It doesn't mean they weren't important to talk about, vacations and raises and what we pay a song evangelist and whatever. Those are all important things, and we can help guide churches. But we really wanted the finance committee report to be a simple enough process that hopefully every church could participate. And I know when I say we haven't changed your obligation, obviously, if 98% of our churches aren't meeting their obligation, then we have changed. But it's a problem that we hope that we can be helpful in trying to fix. Since 2009, there's been no increase to the district budget. We've not taken any more than the 4% that we took in 2009, even in years when budgets have gone up or down. And I can tell you that the cost of operating the Metro District is higher than most of the districts in USA, Canada. Certainly the ones that we're closest to.
Bruce, one of the things that was helpful is that they used to report the quarterly income to the district finance, and they in turn would give you a breakdown of what your percentage breakdown was, so you can actually compare with what our treasurers do to see that they're in sync with that. I don't know if that's still happening.
We don't. We stopped trying to track your income for you. We were finding out that there were only a few churches that actually reported it, but it put another step in the process for us, and so we're actually looking at a way in which we can work with the General Ministry Center to get your data into the APR and get data back to you in a more timely manner. So one of the things we're going to try and do this year is send out quarterly reports to the churches with what you've sent us, the money that you've sent us. So at least at the very least, you can on a quarterly basis track to make sure that you sent us the proper amount, and that we received it for one thing, and that we sent it out. There are some timing issues because again, because of COVID, we're not fully staffed in the office the way we used to be, where people are in there 3-4 days a week. We have a finance team that's in there 1 day a week. They're able to do everything in that 1 day with terms of checks, but it does mean that there's a little bit of a lag between when we get, if you're still sending us checks, when we get your check, we get it deposited, we get it recorded, and we get the information back to you. But we're trying to work on all of those things at once. For me, the most important thing was to be able to give pastors and local churches an opportunity to feel like they're fully participating in what the international church is asking of us.
Well, what you said in the beginning in terms of at the end of the year filling out the reports and finding out that you're short of your budget requirement And so what you said is correct. Along the way, if the churches can feel that they're in sync rather than waiting to the end of the year, it'd be good for them. Not all treasurers are up to the standard of doing these things. So maybe, especially the smaller churches, well, not mine, we pretty much know where we are, but some churches would need the financial help to be able to work out those details to make sure that those percentages are all correct or close to correct instead of waiting. Because when you go online and you fill it out, you know, they throw a number in there and you don't, and if they don't have a clue how related to their giving, it's a problem. They scratch their heads over and over, and there's nobody to turn to in the district to help them.
Yeah. Sure, Linda, I see that hand.
It's not a virtual hand.
Oh.
I have what is probably a question I should know the answer to, but I will be humble and ask it. Is the money that's sent to the denomination, are they running on a January to December calendar?
Yes.
They are. And so if money goes in, because of course, at the end of the year, we're going to try to get the adjustment to the 12% or now the 14% in.
Sure.
Will that make it in to the, to the annual report? Because it'll be past their December deadline.
Yes. So let me see if I have your question. So what the church gives us, the general church gives us a little bit of a little window where we can send money in from the district to the general church after December 31st.
Yes.
We give the local churches a window.
Yes.
We generally say if you send it to us by December or by January 15th, you can count it towards the previous fiscal year.
Right.
And usually we stretch that 15th of January about a week. We get checks in the middle of February where pastors are adamant that this has to go on the previous year. The general church won't let us do that. So
yeah, I don't blame them.
We have a little bit of grace, but it's not unferreted. I mean, it's contained a little bit. So we do our best in January to try and get the monies in as quickly as possible, get them out as quickly as possible, to get them allocated to your account, and we make sure and track that so we know what we're doing when we send it off, that it should hit your account. Is that the question related to December?
So generally, because usually it takes us some time to cut the check for, year end, we do get it in by whatever date you say. And so my question is, let's just say it's January 8th. If you then take it and send our portion, Westchester Chapel's portion, to the general denomination,
Right.
Will it then make it in?
Yeah. If you meet our deadline, I can pledge to you that we will meet their deadline. That's
excellent. Okay, that's all I need to know. And then I just had one other question, or perhaps hope. Of course, none of us who are on the board now at Westchester Chapel were on the board in 2009. And so, all this was, I could never figure out why nothing was matching. But is there a way you could give us just maybe a piece of your PowerPoint that we could put in our handbook to pass on to the next board so they...
Oh, I can give you that whole PowerPoint, actually. I just took pieces of the finance committee report because there's a whole lot in there of this, that, and the other thing. So I just took pieces of that, but I'd be more than happy to send out that PowerPoint as PDF slides that you can do that. It is in the delegate handbook, everything that's there, including the nice colorful little pie charts.
You know what? I just love your simple 14%. And so when we all go to our great reward, they say, oh, we should send in 14% too.
Yeah.
So
yes,
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
Bruce, I don't have a question. I just have a thank you for doing this, because the last 2 years have been very frustrating. And then, being questioned by the board, well, if we're sending this in and we're doing a Easter and Thanksgiving offering, and we have people who give directly to the general church for the World Evangelism Fund, why aren't we meeting our quota? But I think this is the first time, at least for me, that I'm hearing what that difference of what the actual percentage was that we were supposed to send. So even though we were doing the extra, it didn't equal that extra 1.5% to the World Evangelism Fund. And I don't think we knew about the extra to ENC. So thank you for doing this. It really clarifies things. So
Well,
thank you.
that's probably the fault of your predecessor at Warwick Valley, because he didn't know that either. So I'd blame him if I were you.
Okay.
Whoever that crazy guy was. For those of you who don't know, it's me. So I'm just singing myself out. Some of you do, but it's and God bless Anthony Abbazio. He tried to explain it every year, and I heard it every year, and I still never understood it until I really started reading it. And John Butters last year, and then Wayne Elliott and I this year, we just went through it, and I'm just sitting there saying, there's got to be a simpler way that, in fact, even before we did this, I went back to Tony and said, no, I'm not asking for more money. Am I? I'm not really, based on what our obligations were, but clearly churches weren't either catching the vision or they didn't understand. Let's go with that. Most of them didn't really understand versus didn't, but they always had questions at the end of the year, and we'd scratch our heads and say, I don't know how this happened. But Sam's mission from day one is a reminder to the staff that, in fact, it was in our staff meeting today as well. We exist to help the local church flourish, and so if we can help you do that, we certainly want to be part of it. And by the way, the general superintendent wasn't very happy with this model when Art implemented it, because what Art was doing was saying, those Easter and Thanksgiving offerings that the general church wants you to take for world evangelism, Art was like, okay, fine, but that's going to be part of the 5.5%. And seems to me it was Nina Gunner or back then, whoever it was not particularly thrilled, and Art was able to say, this is how Metro is going to do it, and we did it. And so Cecil probably remembers that more than
I remember that the district assembly, even though we adopted that model, the generals never really accepted it, even from the pulpit.
Yeah.
They never really accepted it.
I was, hi guys, I was in the meeting. It was JK
Okay.
Warwick, and it was sort of an impasse when the district superintendent disagreed with the
Yes.
JJGS, and like we kind of, our position was to be sort of renegade from the standpoint of the general church, from the so I it was easier for me at that time in the position that I stood. I just kept quiet in the meeting.
Chris, I have a question. This is David Solomon.
Yep.
I understand the model, the global church model. I understand the district is trying to, again, fulfill its obligation, and every church should fulfill their obligation as well. Has there been any conversation around the 2.25 for pension and benefits? Is there any? I know it seems low, but we don't want to increase. How can we make this better? Or is that a separate conversation? I need to take.
Well, the 5.5, 2.25, and 2.25 are numbers that are set by the general church, and they're set every General Assembly. So, next year's General Assembly, somebody could make a motion from the floor to up that percentage or something. I think all of us understand, and it's not rocket science. We're not, none of these amounts, including the 4% to the district, come close to bearing the costs of those programs that they're supporting. My dad's been an elder in the church. He's be 90, he'll be 91 this August. He was ordained at 25, so whatever that is, 65, whatever, 65 years. He's been an elder. When he retired, his pension from P&B is like $280 a month. I mean, there's literally nowhere in the country a Nazarene elder could retire and live on P&B. And these days, it doesn't even cover the Medicare prescription benefit. So I think the church has a lot of reckoning to do in terms of how we treat pastors and others when they retire, including missionaries. And the only place that can really be challenged is at the General Assembly. Now, a local church is free to send on their pastor's behalf to their pastor's IRA with Fidelity. So a local church could decide to send 5% of a pastor's salary, or a pastor could do something and the local church could match it. I mean, there's any number of things the local church could do, and we'd be happy to work with local church boards that are interested in that, in finding ways to help pastors better plan for retirement. Because if a pastor is 25 or 30 in the ministry, there's plenty of time for them to have some type of supplemental retirement system set up. If you're my age, there's no time. So yeah, I at the district level, we've not discussed increasing that percentage on the district side of the equation. What we have done is sometimes we get special gifts that are sent into the district to be used for some ministry that a local church wants to support, but they don't know what the ministry is. So we've realized in the last few years that really, if a church sends anything into us and we send into a pension of any amount of money, $50, whatever, actually $1 would count. But let's say that a church hadn't sent in anything. If the church sends even $1 to P&B on behalf of their pastor through us, that triggers a life insurance policy on the pastor. And most pastors, particularly in the smaller and small to medium-sized churches, aren't able to afford a life insurance on their pastors, and their pastors can't afford it. And so this is a pretty inexpensive way to get some coverage, and there's some increasing levels in that. So the more you do, it's a little better, and the longer, and all this thing. But the idea being that if we could even send, the end of the year, if we could figure out who hasn't sent anything, we could just fire off $10 for each one of those pastors to P&B. Then they have a policy of coverage. So there are things the district can do. And I think getting people aware, Jeff Barker, every time he meets with a church board about a pastor, he talks about this issue of why budgets are important, and P&B is really one of the critical ones. And so we want to support that. We want to support clearly Eastern Nazarene College. A lot of churches and some leaders will say, well, we don't have any students that are going there. But ENC is this year making a scholarship available to every Nazarene student that goes to ENC of $5,000. On top of that Nazarene scholarship, if you're just affiliated with and a participant at the local church, local Nazarene church, you get that scholarship. On top of that, there's a pastor's kid scholarship. So ENC gives way back to the districts more than districts are able to keep up with on the funding mechanism. And so I think we just keep talking about these things and reminding local churches of, I mean, local churches all know the good that World Evangelism Fund does. That's never, nobody really ever has to talk about evangelism and world missions and all of that. It gets talked about and people know it. But it's a little harder to get buy-in on ENC and pensions. But we engage those conversations when we can.
Thank you.
If you haven't typed in the chat window, I'm still collecting names and church that you're affiliated with and your responsibility there, as well as a correct email address. I explained at the start of this, we were trying to update our records, and every time we have one of these events, we're going to try and get people to give us their information. So if you haven't done that and you can, that'd be great. If you get lots of emails from us, then we have your email address and you don't need to worry about it. Other questions? These are great. We are recording this, so we'll have it available somewhere. Tito will post it. I'm not really sure where it'll be, but we will have it available after the fact. So. And of course, you're always free to call Colleen at the district office.
Bruce?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. My name is Bruce also. I'm from East Rockaway, Nazarene. And we just had a couple questions. One is, we really appreciate what you mentioned about pensions and with what we can do for pastors and so on and so forth, because we very much were not aware of that in that respect. But my question is, based on everything I've heard here, and this is my first meeting with everyone, you mentioned that the 4% really doesn't cover the programs that are available and that are out there right now. So I guess the way I look at it from my background is, do we have a program available to those churches that are not meeting their responsibilities right now to help them to get to that level? Because if everything's based off of a percentage, and that just puts more money out there for us to run those particular programs. I don't know if I said it right, but.
And you're talking about the 4% that the district keeps?
I'm talking about the 14% overall that we'll be responsible for now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and what I guess the point I was making was that Eastern Nazarene College, World Evangelism Fund, Metro District, our operating expenses are far above those percentages of monies that are sent to us. So for example, on the Metro New York District, the fact that Visionaries years ago made an arrangement with a piece of property we owned in Times Square, that generates about $500,000 a year of income to the Metro New York District. The value of that land lease as it currently sits is around $35 million. We'll get that 500,000 for another 80 something years. There have been some other ways in which we've been, so we have those funds invested. We also have our investment accounts at the Nazarene Foundation. They're down this month, but they're around $8 million. So we get the dividends and the interest income off of those as well. So Metro's very fortunate. If we were running the district based solely on the 4% or the monies that came from the local church, we would probably need to be in the 8 to 9% range, asking churches to give 19 or 20%. It just wouldn't be possible to operate. Some districts operate with a DS in one office secretary. The complexity of the metro district, where we're talking 120 churches, one DS and one secretary wouldn't be able to do it. So we've been very fortunate. I think the fact that we've understood the pressure on the local church, particularly in the last probably 10 years with declining church attendance, or even the fact that today's new attenders, the new people that are being attracted to churches, are not people with a legacy of giving tithes and offerings. That's not something they grew up doing and they understand. And so it's much harder today to convince even a new young family to your church that the biblical principles of tithes and offerings. And so we understand that, which is one of the reasons we've not adjusted those numbers over the 23 or the 13 years. Metro still is at the same 4% that we're at, and the general church hasn't altered theirs. I'm not very confident they would, but I do think it's worth a conversation at General Assembly that says, what we're paying pastors isn't allowing them to retire. We have pastors who are going to be 72, 75, 80 years old, still in the pulpit because they have a house and a small stipend, and they have nowhere to go, and they have no substantial retirement income. So it's one of the areas that we've had to deal with, but that's really what I meant by the shortfall.
Bruce, if I might say something to that, Bruce, we really, this perhaps is the first time that our office is having a discussion like this, because one of my committed approaches was to make the local church sense that we are their ally before even talking about money. And and I think that speaks to your question very, very directly. The reason we exist is to make the local church succeed, and we really want to do that. And one of the things that we have done, we have, and we will keep on doing this, is to share with the local church seminars or ways that can help the local church to generate the funding that it can do. I mean, as a pastor at Bronx Bethany for the years that I was, the lessons we learned there, we are anxious to share with the local church in terms of some of those things. But
thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, yeah. Our real thing is to make if the local church flourishes, the discussion about money is going to be easier than if the local church is vanquished.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I think this discussion, especially, we were somewhat distracted over the past 2 years with just survival, with the COVID and all that stuff. But if things become normal, Colleen is here, that was a colleague of mine in the leadership of Bronx Bethany, and we found, we found a particular approach towards giving there that we, you know, it's quite remarkable. And I'm sure that we will want to share that with the district in some of the cases. I'll just give you a little insight. There, a few years ago, we decided to ask people to just give not only their tithes, but towards certain things, and to set out a number that they would give for the year. And to my certain knowledge, the people that gave in that campaign, it was like a 2-year thing. There were several people who have never gone back to what they used to do before, because they found that for 2 years they were giving this amount and it didn't hurt them. And in fact, I know of people who have steadily increased their giving, far more than the 10% in some cases. And Colleen is on here. I think she knows she can perhaps bear me out if she wants to.
Yeah, and I was saying to our lead pastor who asked me to sit in on this meeting, Pastor Richard Griffiths, that how much this has helped us during COVID as a result of persons or congregant getting into a pattern of giving over and above 10% of their giving for over 2-year period. That how much that helped the church during COVID, because those persons, a lot of them took on the discipline and never went back to how they were not given. They realized that they made a sacrifice and a commitment to give for a 2-year period, but once that campaign was over, they publicly, some of them came forth and says that they don't want to go back to holding back their tithes, but they wanted to give their offering first. And they believe that once they did that God would meet their, help them to meet their needs.
Amen.
Okay, that's the hour we set aside. I'm still willing to hang out, but I'm gonna turn the recording off because I want our recording to be less than an hour.
Bruce,
but-
have you answered Corinne's question that she has in the chat?
Well, what I said was I would follow up with her and check.
Okay,
I'm going to check on that one.
Thank you guys for coming out. This is not always an easy discussion, especially for me, but we're trying to clarify and to help in every way that we can in this matter.
And my email's there, Pastor Bruce at mnynows.com. If you have more questions, or if you want to give it to your treasurer or somebody in the finance team to send us an email, feel free to get a hold of us. And we'll do everything we can to help you. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
Bruce.
good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Dawson.
Thank you.